Hi, my name's Tim Lutton. I'm an industrial designer. I've been working as an industrial designer professionally for the last 2 years. Prior to that, I did a lot of freelance graphic design and industrial design work whilst I studied at RMIT. So I studied industrial design at RMIT, and I was lucky enough in 2021 to be named by the Design Institute of Australia the Graduate of the Year for Industrial Design across the whole of the country. The way that I found industrial design was a little bit of an accident. So in year 10, I did work experience at an architecture firm. It was an incredible experience for me. But what I realized is that I didn't really enjoy the work of designing buildings and designing spaces. What really got me interested was the design of the toilets and the design of the hand dryers and the design of the taps that went into the bathrooms that I was working on in my work experience week. And so I asked the architects who designs those, and they told me that that was an industrial designer. And then from that moment onwards, I knew that I needed to study industrial design, because for me, I like products and I like things that interact with people, especially in this case, more so than the spaces that they're going into. And so that's how I got into industrial design. Cool, so what actually is design? So design to me is all about pure problem solving. And the amazing thing about this is that anybody can solve a problem, and a problem can be anything. And that means that anybody can be a designer. As much as you can go to university and you can study how to solve problems better and how to solve problems with specific skills and specific technologies, at its core, what I love about design is that it's open to anybody. Because if you have an idea, if you have a process, if you have any sort of passion towards anything, you can apply that and you can find a path in design that will fit your needs and your skill set. So I think it's really important, especially if you're considering pursuing design and you're at a high school level, to ditch the traditional definition of design being limited to just architecture and engineering and things like that. Because obviously these areas are incredibly useful, they're incredibly valuable, and there's amazing work to be done in those spaces. But it's important to think a little bit more broadly, because design is so much more than just these areas. Because realistically speaking, if design is all about problem solving, there are problems everywhere, and there are always problems needing solving. So a really interesting example for me when it comes to design that's not necessarily typically viewed as design are in companies like finance firms and banks and that sort of thing. Say for example, like a large bank, they don't just employ people who are in finance, they employ a whole range of different people, and some of those people are designers. And the reason that the designers are hired is not because they have great skills with money or because they have banking experience, although they might. Typically why designers are hired in these firms is because they come with design thinking skills. And it's those skills that are incredibly important because they can be adapted to any different problem. And that's what people need. People need the problem solving skills. And so when you're looking for like a career path or you're thinking about design, think about it more in terms of what is a problem that needs solving rather than what disciplines already exist. Because if you can find an industry that has problem solving on a day-to-day basis, which a lot of the time is most industries, chances are you'll be able to find a role or a type of design that can actually fit into that and maybe align more with your interests instead of just being a straight sort of field of design like architecture. If you have something else that you're passionate about, as well as design, link those two things together and see what you can find, because I think that's incredibly important and something that people don't always realize. Cool. So you may have heard of the term industrial design, but the term is actually incredibly broad and it encompasses a whole range of different projects across a whole range of different industries. So for me personally, some of my favorite projects that have included, I've built a little terrarium, which is basically a small garden inside a watch. I've designed a system that treats the wastewater from home washing machines. I've designed a drink bottle that melts snow. And at the moment, I'm also working on store design and things that go into retail stores and a little bit of interior design as well. So those projects are all incredibly broad, but they are all covered by the umbrella of industrial design. And realistically speaking, there are a million different more sub areas that you could go into within industrial design, but that's where I sit at the moment. So one of my favorite projects that I've worked on, funnily enough, was actually my Year 12 major work. So this project is called the H2 Snow, and it's a drink bottle that makes snow into water. And so this drink bottle is a survival tool. And the idea for it came when one of my friends was skiing on a mountain that's not in a ski resort, and he broke his leg. And then he was stranded on the mountain for a couple of days until they could get a team of people in to rescue him. Now, in a survival situation, you can't actually eat snow to keep hydrated because that will give you hypothermia and then you are imminently closer to death. So what I wanted to do was create something that could melt snow without relying on any gas or any fuel because those things can run out very quickly. So I wanted to make a drink bottle that could make snow into water without those resources. And so what I did was I researched all these different ways to create heat with just the human body and just using your human input. And what I created was a drink bottle that has a handle on it that when you turn that handle, it makes heat through friction. And that melts the snow. And then you don't need to rely on things like gas that will run out in a survival situation. So I think it's important as well to note some of the main skills that you'll need as a designer. So what's really important is to not just pigeonhole yourself into skills that are straight hard technical skills like just straight mathematics or doing 3D modeling or something really specific like that. Because at the end of the day, these are incredibly important skills and they're incredibly valuable skills. But realistically speaking, what separates sort of a good designer from the rest of the crowd, in my opinion, are actually the soft skills, not necessarily those harder technical skills. And so to me, the three main skills that you're going to need as a designer, and this is very important because they're transferable across any industry, across any project, they're empathy, communication, and storytelling. Okay, so in terms of empathy, this is something that I think can often be overlooked when people think about design. Because if we take a step back and we again consider design to be all about problem solving, how do we solve a problem? Well, chances are we're going to need to learn about that problem if it's not our own. So in terms of empathy, it's really important to put yourself into somebody else's shoes. It's really important to listen, and then to listen some more. Because at the end of the day, if you're solving a problem that isn't your own, the only way that you can actually get to a solution that's going to benefit those involved is to listen to what they need. Because for the majority of the projects that you'll work on, the solution isn't for you, it's for the client. It's for somebody else. It's for a need that's been identified by somebody else. So another really important design skill to have is communication. Now, communication can take a range of different forms, but to me, in my personal practice, I like to think of communication firstly in terms of sketching, and secondly in terms of model making. So in addition to working as an industrial designer, I also currently work as a sessional lecturer at RMIT, and I teach design drawing within the industrial design course. And so my advice to anybody who wants to get better at design drawing is to first sacrifice your ego and focus less on perfection in drawing and more about communication in drawing. Now, a really powerful way to do this is to actually start drawing all of your work in ballpoint pen or something that you can't erase. So one of the main reasons we use ballpoint pen or something that you can't erase is because when you're drawing, you're forced to start thinking about what lines you're putting down. You're forced to start making conscious decisions about where you do and don't put things down as well. And finally, the other benefit of using something that you can't erase is that you're going to have a lot more ideas sitting on your page that you haven't rubbed out. You may have quite terrible ideas or quite terrible drawings, but they're still going to be there. And the important thing is that they are there because they're part of a broader process of you trying to come up with an idea. And they're going to tell the overall story, no matter how good or bad they are. So the other big part of communication, in my opinion, is model making. And when I say model making, I don't mean in just the 3D sense, like 3D modeling in a 3D modeling program. I mean just really quick, really scrappy models made out of cardboard or models made out of clay or anything you really have your hands on. Some of my best models that I've made, especially whilst at university, have literally been made from toilet rolls and cereal boxes. And obviously they're nothing crazy to look at, but what's really important is that they convey an idea. That's an incredibly important part of the process. And it happens before you jump into sort of 3D modeling or something a little bit more complicated like that, because you can save a lot of time by just really putting the basics together and thinking about that before you go and start really thinking about it further in a 3D modeling environment. So the final part of communication is documentation. So making copies and documenting everything that you do. When we think about this in terms of sketching, that's as simple as scanning your work. And I would really suggest doing this and keeping all the sketches that you've ever done on just a big folder on your computer, because you never know when you're going to need that work and you never know when it's going to come up. Same with model making as well. When you've made a model, take a photo of it, but preferably do this against a white background or some neutral background, because if you need to come back to that photo again later on, and maybe you need to Photoshop it and make it look a little bit nicer, well, it's going to be a lot easier to do that if you've got a nice simple background. The final reason that documentation is incredibly important is because if anything ever comes up intellectual property wise, or you need proof that you have come up with an idea or a concept at a certain time, if you've documented that and you've documented it well, well, that's reasonably compelling evidence to suggest that that idea was yours in the first place. So the final important skill to have as a designer, in my opinion, is storytelling. So storytelling refers to thinking more broadly than just the design project and thinking about how that design project exists within the world. So a really good example of this is thinking in terms of advertisements on TV. With these, you never just see a product or a thing, just as itself. You see that design existing within a broader environment. You see that design interacting with somebody. You see that design creating value in somebody's life. And all of those things coming together around the product and around how people interact with the product or the design project in general, those are the things that create a story around that product. And that's what's really powerful. And that's where the impact of these projects can lie, is if you can articulate how your design project or how your object can help somebody else or create additional value within the world. That's what storytelling is all about. Cool, so my name is Tim Lutton. I'd just like to say thank you for listening to my story, and also please subscribe to 100 Designers Say for more design stories like this.